Welcome back, everyone. I was just sitting down to sharpen up a couple of my knives, and I thought I'd turn the video camera on and bring you guys along. I've done some of this in the past, but I don't think that video is available any longer, and that's sharpening with Japanese water stones, so I'll just go ahead and go through the sequence as I do it. For those of you guys who are not familiar with Japanese water stones, they are typically you're going to use 3 different grits, and this is what they'll look like. You can buy these online. They've got them on eBay. There's several different grits available. What I found to be about the best, or a good place to start, what most guys use, is to start off with an 800 grit. And after the 800, then you go with a 1200, and then a final is a polishing stone, and that will be about a 6000. And with the 6000 grit, this is not entirely necessary, but I think it works a little bit better. A lot of these stones will come with, the finer polishing stones will come with a small stone. I believe it's called a Nagura stone. And what that is used for is for working up a bit of a slurry on the polishing stone before you get started. And it's really useful to take some of that slurry, especially on knives that are used for bushcrafting, or you're using to cut or whittle wood. Knives that have a high carbon steel like bushcraft knives do, to polish away the stains that are brought on by the tannins in the wood, and it's useful for that. So the knife I'm going to sharpen right now for the video is going to be my bushcraft knife, and the nice thing about the bushcraft knives is they have the Scandinavian Grind. In other words, apart from this is my old Gerber fixed hunting knife that I've had since I was probably about 12 years old. I think I got this when I first started hunting, back when Gerber used to make good knives before they sold out and started making cheap crap, which is too bad. But let's focus on the Scandinavian Grind. The nice thing about this is it's very easy to sharpen because you have this angle already predetermined. And when you're using these type of stones, you simply tilt the knife up on the angle and then slice through the stone. Where when you're sharpening a lot of other type of knives, you have to maintain that micro bevel on there, and that takes a little bit of practice, but it's definitely doable. But I don't spend the time it takes to go through this procedure for my EDC knives and knives, my just worker duty knives. But the knives that I really care about and want to be exceedingly sharp, as sharp as humanly possible, i.e. a hunting knife, bushcraft knife, this is the way to do it. And it's very satisfying. I really enjoy it. Okay, before you use your stones, what you want to do is you'll soak them in water. And you can see here, once you put them in, when they're dry, they'll bubble. And it takes I'd say about 20 minutes. 30 minutes is a good time, ideal time for them to be completely saturated. And you'll know they're saturated when they'll stop bubbling. And once they are completely saturated, then you're ready to go. And you really want to keep the stone wet. And what I do is I just keep the water nearby. And when it gets dry, I just put a little on there and just keep it nice and wet. I'm very particular about these 2 knives and keeping them sharp, so I don't need to do a lot of work. But starting with the 800 grit, I'll start on one side, I'll tip it up on the bevel, and slice. I'll change directions. And for me, unless I get a nick or something that damages the knife, about 8 times per side, 8 to 16 times per side is more than enough. One thing you'll see here, I'll zoom in for you, is the black lines. And what that is you can see, obviously that's the steel coming off of the knife. And what you'll find with knives is what looks to be a perfectly flat grind from the manufacturer often is not. because when you take a new stone like this, it is perfectly flat, providing you get quality stones. And what you'll see, especially when your knives are new, is you'll see polish marks. You can see here, this knife right here, it has, I have not had to sharpen it very many times, but you can see right there the different sheens, the polishes. That tells me right there that there's just a bit of a high spot. It's too slight to feel or to tell by touch or by sight, but once you start putting it on the stone, you can see right there where that actually is a high spot. But that's fine, because over time that will be brought down, and then once we pass this knife across the stone, we'll get a nice broad gray streak. But even though they're uneven like that, it's not going to prevent you from getting a really keen edge on it. Alright, so once we're done with the 800, we'll put our 1200 down. What I do is I put these on one of these paper towels or a wet rag, anything like that. It seems to help keep it from sliding when the surface gets wet. They actually make little rubber clamps that these things can bolt into and hold them. I just haven't really found that to be a need. A damp rag seems to be fine. And we're going to do the same thing with the 1200 grit. You know, depending on how much work your knife needs, I think a good rule of thumb is going to be about 16 passes per side. It's just an arbitrary number. It's just kind of what I do to keep track of it. Some guys will say you can do 8 on one side and then turn the knife over and do 8 on the other side and then alternate. But I think it's a much better practice to alternate with each pass of the stone. That way you keep your edge nice and centered. I've lost track of kind of how many I'm doing here, so if I don't do the prescribed amount there, I apologize. But we'll give it a few more. I like to see those wide, broad streaks of metal across there. I really know that the stone is doing its job in cutting the steel. There's something that's really satisfying about this. I really enjoy it, the process. And like I said, it's a little tedious for your everyday knives, but for the knives that are really special to you, that you really need to be sharp, this is a good way to go. Alright, so when we finish up with the 1200 grit, then we'll bring out our polishing stone. You know, I've seen some guys that use 8000. I have chosen the 6000. The 6000 is very, very fine. It just puts a mirror image on the blade. So take your Nagura stone here, and you can see a nice slurry being worked up there. It's about good. I want you to see this blade before we polish it. You can see right there, you can kind of see some of the high spots by the change in the reflection. And this side is even a little bit different. What we're ultimately going for is a highly polished leading edge here, and that's what we're going to get from the 6000 stone. The higher polished the edge is, the longer it's going to last. So make sure that you keep a little water on this, but don't put so much water on there that it wipes all your slurry off. And we're going to repeat the process here. You can see those nice broad streaks of metal. I like to sharpen this knife often so I can work those high spots down. It'll take years for it to become perfectly flat, but it's a nice goal to aim for. These water stones are not too expensive. One way, I've seen some that are two-sided, so you can get an 800 on one side or a 1200 on the other, kind of a combination. You can save a few bucks that way. My thought on that is it's important that the stone be flat, and I like to have the ability to turn the stone over once, if I get to the point where it wears down and it's difficult to use. The stone will last twice as long. Give this a few more passes, and then we should be able to see the evidence of the polishing. I would spend a little bit more time with the polishing stone, but just for the sake of the video, so it doesn't drag on too long, you can get the idea. You can see that beautiful mirror image. You can see my reflection on it right there, just from a few passes on that 6000 grit. Isn't that just gorgeous? That's really nice. Once you are done with that, take a little bit of the slurry on your finger, and be careful to stay away from that edge. And if you do use your knife for whittling or working with natural products, even blood or like I said, the tannin in wood, it will stain, especially on a high carbon steel. And just work that a little bit with your finger. And if you want, you can even work it this way. It's not going to harm the knife at all. It's such a fine surface, it will do nothing but eventually bring a high luster and polish to your knife. Alright, well, we're not done there. There's one last thing you need to do, and that's going to be to stroke the blade. Even using these fine stones, you're going to get a very small micro bevel on here, and it's noticeable when you go to cut paper. So what I'll do is I'll stroke this, and actually I'll show you how I do it. Let me go grab my steel. Alright, and what stroping is essentially taking your knife and you want to remove that micro bevel. Now this is going to be a very light action. There's lots of different things you can use. I have a ceramic rod from a V-style sharpener that I'll use. Another thing, one of the best things you can use is the top of your windshield on your door. You can roll your door glass down a few inches and stroke off the back of that. That will work. A leather strap is also, a really good thing to stroke with, providing it doesn't have any coatings or shoe polish on it, but just a raw leather like the old barbers used to use. Lots of different things you can use. But this needs to be a very light process here, and it doesn't have to be, you don't want it flat, but you don't want a super extreme angle. It's not super critical, just a bit of an angle, and just very lightly with the weight of the blade we're going to drag that across there. And you can actually bring back a knife isn't too far gone on the back of on the glass of your car door or truck door by this process. And it's a good way to keep your knife topped off, and you don't have to go through this process near as often. And very light. The weight of the knife, not much more than that, is sufficient just to knock off that little bevel. Alright, let's see how it cuts. Alright, we have just a regular piece of printer paper here. Pretty sharp. You should be able to take a knife and plunge it and cut radiuses like that. So that's sharp. That's as sharp as it ever needs to be. And as I said, a very satisfying process. So if you have knives that are really important, like your hunting knives or special knives, this is a very, as far as I know, this is probably the way to get your knife as sharp as it possibly can be. So thanks for watching. I hope this was informative, and I will see you on the next one.